Okay, good game, bye. Houston, be advised, the visual is go today. This is Houston, roger out. Let me know when it converts. The other finally giving you a window like that. That's good, blank bird. Steering bird, yep. 11 Houston, your guidance.
Welcome to the Cosmosphere podcast, episode 17, Mission Control and Mars Curiosity. I'm your host, John Molnix, and I'm a volunteer here at the Cosmosphere. You can also catch me on my other podcast, The Space Shot. This month's episode is coming out later because I had an unfortunate coffee accident with my laptop, which put me way behind schedule. In this episode, you're going to hear my conversation with Sarah Lamm, a doctoral student at Northern Arizona University. We chat about curiosity and her experience as a science communicator. But up first, we've got Jim Remar back on the show to talk to us about SpaceWorks completing the historic MOCR restoration. Let's dive into that chat.
Okay, all flight controllers, go for powered descent. Retro?
Go.
FIDO.
Go.
Guidance.
Go.
Control.
Go.
Telcom.
Go.
GNC.
Go.
Ecom.
Go.
Surgeon.
Go.
Capcom, we're go for powered descent.
Today, we've got Jim Remar, the president and CEO of the Cosmosphere, back on to talk to us about his experience at Johnson Space Center with the return of the MOCR consoles to their home. Jim, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, John. It's always a pleasure.
Hey, I appreciate you taking the time, especially it's kind of crunch time here with the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11, so we're going to dive right in. The MOCR restoration was about an 18-month project, almost 2 years. Talk a little bit about what the end of the project means and how it was when you got to Johnson Space Center and were able to see the consoles back in mission control.
Well, first, it was an honor to be involved and play a role in the MOCR restoration project. Overall, it is probably one of the top 3 or 4 projects the Cosmosphere has been involved in, just because of the historic significance of the MOCR, of which many consider to be the cathedral to early manned space exploration. So from that perspective, an incredible opportunity. It was sort of bittersweet, almost like sending your kid off to college when the project came to an end. But when we walked into the MOCR for the first time and seeing it in its completed state, quite honestly, it gave me goosebumps. It was incredible. And the entire restoration team did an absolutely phenomenal job. A lot of people associate the consoles with the MOCR, but the project was so much more. It was taking that historic space and really reviving it, taking something that had become dilapidated and returning it to as it was during its use, especially its use during the Apollo era. And to see the controllers, especially Gene Kranz, go in there and see their eyes almost tear up was amazing. And it's a bit surreal to know you played a role in a project of such historic magnitude. I'm at a loss for words, as you can tell. It was just something I will never forget, and a highlight for me personally.
Well, it's definitely one of those once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. I mean, the restoration, it was literally from the carpet to the consoles. Everything was put back to its Apollo era glory. So, knowing that it's been preserved for future generations is just... I think it's awe-inspiring that, all the work that SpaceWorks did to get the consoles back to where they looked during Apollo is just, it's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
A little bit lost for words too.
Yeah, right. And the measures that the restoration team took to ensure authenticity, as you said, the carpet, the wallpaper, the ceiling tiles, the seats in the visitor viewing room, all of those things, all those components were restored exactly as they were during their use, and to sit in the viewing room and to look down onto the MOCR. Prior to the restoration, it was sort of mundane. I mean, you didn't have any appreciation for what took place in that room. Now with the restoration, the way the room comes to life, and through the visitor viewing experience, a visitor leaves knowing that they just saw one of the special iconic areas related to this country and our country's space initiatives.
I couldn't agree more. And I was at Johnson Space Center last in 2016, before the restoration had taken place, and I saw the consoles in their previous state, and there's no comparison between the two. So I'm excited to get back to JSC to see them in their finished state.
Absolutely.
So, Jim, it is bittersweet. You've sent the MOCR kids off to college, as it were. What's next? SpaceWorks isn't an empty nester, so there's going to be stuff going on.
Fortunately, they aren't empty nesters. Right now, we're finishing up our NASA Team 2 traveling exhibit. This month, the team will be heading out to various sites to install the Team 2 exhibit, which actually talks about the history of mission control, past, present, and future, and what it takes and means today to be a mission controller. So we'll be working on that. Hopefully, late summer, early fall, we'll get the Skylab 4 command module. It's presently at Uvar Hazy undergoing conservation. It'll be sent here, and we'll build the display case for it for the Oklahoma History Center down in Oklahoma City. We'll also be reconfiguring our shuttle simulator used in camps.
Awesome.
NASA retired shuttle in 2011. We continue to fly shuttle a little longer, but by next year, 2020 camp season, we'll be current again with some type of capsule configuration. So the team will be doing that, and then we'll also be working on some of the changes to the museum. We're going to be putting in new kids discovery area down in the museum and redoing the intro to the museum. So SpaceWorks will have some involvement with that. Awesome. And then we're looking at putting some smaller traveling exhibits together that we can get out onto the road and send to various locales. So no shortage of work.
That's good. On the incredible work that they do, the traveling exhibits, I'm really excited about that because it can really share, the what's special about the Cosmosphere with more people. So,
absolutely.
Well, Jim, thank you very much for coming on. We'll have you on again in the future, and look forward to seeing you out there for the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11.
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to be in D.C.
No!
Yeah, I'll be out. I'll be out at the National Mall for the 50th celebration out there. So yeah,
fair enough. Well, have fun with that and get lots of good pictures.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, all flight controllers, go for landing. Retro.
Go.
Fido.
Go.
Guidance. Go. Control.
Manual control is
GNC. Go.
Roger, copy.
Surgeon.
Go.
Capcom, we're go for landing.
Eagle, Houston, you're a go for landing. Over.
Next up, we've got Carla with some news about what's going on at the Cosmosphere. There's great family activities this summer as we approach the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11, so be sure to check out the show notes for links to everything we've spoken about today. We've got Carla back on the podcast to talk to us about what's going on in July here at the Cosmosphere. It's the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11, so naturally there is no shortage of events. Carla, what does the Cosmosphere have going on?
Well, like you said, John, we have a whole lot to offer for actually the rest of the summer, quite honestly, but especially the week of the anniversary. So I might start there.
Perfect.
Fill you in on the things that are happening specifically to celebrate the anniversary. So we'll begin on Monday, July 15th with a presentation and film screening with author Rick Houston. So Rick Houston is the co-author of Go Flight, The Unsung Heroes of Mission Control. And he's going to come in and do a book discussion at 6:00 in our planetarium about his writing of that book. And then he also was a producer and consultant for the documentary film called Mission Control: The Unsung Heroes of Apollo. So he'll talk about working on that film, and then we'll screen that film. And following all of that, he will meet guests and sign books. And the tickets to that event are only $5 plus tax. They are on sale already. And the best way to purchase those tickets in advance is to call our box office at 620-665-9312. Then on Tuesday, the 16th, we're going to participate in the U.S. Space and Rocket Center's Global Rocket Launch World Record Attempt. So from 10 to 2 o'clock in our lobby, we'll have paper stomp rockets for folks to build and then launch. And after they launch it, they'll just record their name and the number of rockets that they launched, and we will turn that in to help hopefully set a world record that day.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It should be. And if you go on to their website, you'll see that there are lots and lots of places participating in this. So I don't think that we'll have too much trouble reaching that record, but we're more than happy to help here at the Cosmosphere. So then later that night, at 6:30, we're going to have a presentation from a longtime volunteer of ours. His name is Paul Lytle, and the name of this is called You Are There. So Paul is going to take us back in time 50 years ago to the July 1969 as the U.S. and quite honestly, the world is watching the U.S. launch itself into the record books. So Paul is going to be using historic footage, the Walter Cronkite news piece, some of the launch footage. It's going to be a really fantastic presentation. And for those of us that weren't necessarily alive to see it, it'll be a great way to feel like we were there.
That sounds really cool, too. I love being able to watch the old historic news footage from that time. It's just so incredible how many people literally stopped what they were doing and the entire world was watching.
Absolutely. And I think you can kind of relate to this too, John. For folks of a certain age, we don't have this national moment of pride where we are all watching the same thing, maybe just recently, the World Cup here this last weekend. But our collective memories for the younger generation are things like 9/11, and it's not really a happy memory for us where we were all collectively watching something. So to think about the moon landing and how many people across the world were tuned in, it is pretty amazing.
Definitely. And,
okay.
Hopefully we can have more events like that in the future. And I think that's what's really inspiring about Apollo is it's a reminder of all of the incredible, good things we can accomplish if we set our minds to something.
Absolutely. Then on Thursday that week, John, on the 18th, we're going to have our Coffee at the Cosmo, which is our regular third Thursday event. But this one will be specifically centered on the moon landing. It's called We Choose to Go to the Moon. And Shannon Wetzel, our curator, will be offering that presentation. That is free and open to the public. And then immediately following Coffee at the Cosmo, we're going to have a Opera Kansas performance. So Opera Kansas is a group out of Wichita. They're going to be performing some popular music that's all moon themed songs. So that happens at 10:30 in our lobby, again, free and open to the public. And then on that Saturday, the 20th, so the big anniversary day, we have several things happening. It's also falls on our Space Out Saturday, our third Saturday event. So from 10 to 1 in our lobby, we'll offer a number of hands-on kind of younger aged family friendly activities. Children can learn about the spacesuit construction and then construct their own spacesuit or pieces of a spacesuit. Then we're going to have guided tours from docents every hour on the hour from 11 to 4. The even hour tours that day on the 20th will be kind of full museum, full collection. The odd hour tours will be more of an Apollo 11 and Apollo era artifact centered. It does require Hall of Space admission, but if you're a Reno County resident, of course, that's free for you. And then at in the planetarium at 12 and 2, we're going to be screening a brand new Smithsonian documentary that became available to us because we are a Smithsonian affiliate. It's called The Day We Walked on the Moon.
Oh,
So
wow.
this, again, is shown at 12 and 2. It is completely free, but there is limitations on the seating. So it is a first come, first serve basis.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I wish I was out there on Saturday.
And if you can't catch it at 12 or 2, it's actually the documentary that we're going to be showing later that night at our big event of the summer, is what we're saying, Landing on the Lawn. So this is
Awesome.
our big free community event. It's happening from 6 to 11:30 on the Community College, Hutchinson Community College lawn, just north of our Cosmosphere building. It'll have moons and space-themed activities from a number of community organizations. Of course, our science educators will all be out there doing demonstrations and having activities for children and families to participate into. And then after dark, we'll be showing both the 1969 moon landing footage and that documentary I mentioned earlier, The Day We Walked on the Moon, on a giant outdoor screen. And then we will be offering a moon and planet observing with our educators, as well as our huge 16-inch diameter telescope. So
that'll
again,
get some great views.
Yeah, absolutely. There will be some planets to look at, some great stars to look at. The moon does rise pretty late that night. So if you want to see it, you have to hang out with us for a while. But again, that event is from 6 to 11:30, completely free, open to the public. We'll have water, we'll have food truck vendors, and even an adult beverage vendor. So
that sounds like a blast.
No pun intended.
I was gonna leave the you calling out the dad joke to you. So
okay. Or pun intended.
I try my best with the dad jokes and puns. So
I
do
it.
it again.
I enjoy a good pun.
Well, Carla, thanks for coming back on the podcast. I'm looking forward to having you on next time.
Absolutely. I might tell folks too, John, that we have a lot of things going through the summer that if you look at our website, we have new exhibits. We have a new film, obviously. We have a NASA exhibit currently in the house. We're offering extended summer hours. There's just a lot going on. So I highly encourage folks to visit our website and look at the Apollo 50th specific page. If you click up at the top on the one of those tabs up there, it's news and events. Right under there, you'll see Apollo 50, and that has the full listing of everything, including all of these events I just mentioned and the artifacts that are in Cosmosphere collection.
Well, and I'll make sure that's in the show notes for this episode. So just check those if you're interested.
Wonderful. We appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks, Carla. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, John. Bye-bye.
Now, it's time for our long overdue chat with Sarah Lamm. We got into some technical talk about what she did with the Curiosity rover team and her experience with science communication. We're go for that science chat. Today I'm speaking with Sarah Lamm. She's a student in the doctoral program at Northern Arizona University. She graduated from Kansas State University and majored in chemistry, geology, and geography. She's also been an intern on the ChemCam team for the Curiosity rover. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, John, for having me.
So let's start off with a little bit about your background. What made you want to get involved with chemistry, geology, and geography? That's a lot of science there, and I think probably way more than I've had in my lifetime for about a year for you.
When I was in high school, I was really inspired by the Cassini project, and I wanted to work for NASA. I then had to decide between science and engineering. I decided on science, and then when I was in high school as a junior and senior, I was also a full-time community college student. I actually graduated with an associate's degree the same weekend as my high school graduation. I then started at K-State as a junior, but I was only 18 years old, and I knew that I was going to go to grad school eventually, so I might as well take 4 years at K-State to really prepare myself for grad school. That's how I decided on chemistry and geology. is because I knew I couldn't be a full-time student with just one degree. I chose chemistry because I was 18 years old. I didn't really think it through much. I just thought the gas giants, they can be explained with chemistry, and then the rocky planets can be explained with geology. So if I do both degrees, then I can cover the whole solar system and be okay with whatever NASA would throw at me if I eventually worked for them.
Nice.
Even at 18, I mean, it wasn't the most fun, it wasn't the most solid reasoning, but it actually ended up working pretty well.
I would think so.
And then after my first year, I realized that even with the 2 degrees, I still would have a hard time being a full-time student. So I was just going to pick up a GIS certificate. So I started taking mapping classes. And eventually I realized if I just took a few more classes, I could get that 3rd major.
Just go for the trifecta. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Well, and that really gave you a great background for your doctoral work. What are you studying right now?
Broadly speaking, I'm studying chemical variations in Gale Crater with the Curiosity rover. Right now, I'm studying Vera Rubin Ridge, which used to be called Hematite Ridge, which is an iron oxide mineral. And the reason this ridge was so special is from orbit, we could tell that it was both erosion resistant and theoretically full of hematite. And we got there, we didn't find as much hematite as expected. So I'm trying to explain why we were getting those signals on orbit, but also what is a good Earth analog to explain this ridge on Mars.
Well, and what does that ridge on Mars tell us about the past history of the planet?
I think that's still being hotly debated, honestly. They know that at least that crater held a lake at one point, so they're trying to decide what point in Mars history the lake was still on that ridge and what conditions were forming the ridge, and if there was any groundwater that came over the ridge afterwards and might have changed it from what it was previously.
Well, now this is this related then to the work that you did as an intern for the Curiosity rover?
They're slightly different. So what I did as an intern is I would track the manganese abundance throughout the traverse, and manganese is a redox indicator. So if we find high quantities of manganese, it means that there was a highly oxidizing conditions in that area at one point. So it's kind of related in that sense of just the redox state. So Vera Rubin Ridge, with its hematite, it would have to have been at least somewhat oxidizing. But I'm no longer tracking the manganese.
And for oxidizing, exactly, could you just explain that a little bit more? Is it something to do with how water would be present on the surface, or the atmosphere was at one point oxidizing on Mars? Can you go into a little bit more detail?
Yeah, so specifically for an oxidizing environment, you just need a way to lose electrons. And for manganese to concentrate the way it does, it needs highly oxidizing conditions and water. What we're currently debating throughout the team is what was that electron acceptor? The current theory on the team is that Mars had a more oxidizing atmosphere in the past, and that oxygen in that atmosphere would have been the electron acceptor.
So closer to what we've got here on Earth then, or?
Yeah, it should have been much closer to what we have on Earth now. While the oxygen in the atmosphere might not be the only electron acceptor, it's the most likely at this current state from the knowledge we know. There's been other theories thrown around, but this one seems the most likely with what we currently know.
And is this, when you're looking at these types of features on the surface of Mars, is this something that you were able to gain information from the ChemCam then, or were you utilizing other instruments on the Curiosity rover?
I was mostly using ChemCam to study these manganese minerals, since that was the team that was funding me at the time. Right now, through my grad program, I can actually work with any instrument.
So that probably gives you a lot broader look at the surface of Mars than just because you're not limited to the one instrument on Curiosity.
Yes, it's really opened up a lot of doors, and it's nice to check between instruments of do they all have the same reading, and there would be reasons why they wouldn't get the same reading. And that's nice to know, where those variations come from.
Interesting. So for Curiosity, I mean, can you talk a little bit more about those different systems that, different instruments on the rover that you're utilizing right now as a doctoral student?
Yeah, so I'm using APXS, which is the alpha particle X-ray spectrometer, and that also looks at chemical composition like ChemCam. So I use that one to also check the environment. We use Molly, which is the hand lens on board. It's on the arm of Curiosity. I'm using that to look at textures of rocks. We're trying to see if certain textures have certain chemical signals or if it's just a plain rock. We are also using MassCam. MassCam can do multispectral imaging too, which can help with some of the chemical or mineralogy. And then the last one that we are using the last main one we are using is ChemMin. ChemMin is an X-ray diffraction, and it can also tell us mineralogy. That one, we've only have about 3 drill holes in Vera Rubin Ridge, and that's not a lot of data to go off of, but it's what we have to just do.
So drill holes. I know, the Curiosity rover does essentially have a laser on it. Talk a little bit about how Curiosity uses, or can you talk a little bit about how Curiosity uses that laser to drill holes and then analyze, what's inside those rocks?
Yeah, ChemCam is a high-powered laser, and it will vaporize just little minuscule flecks off of a rock and just burn a hole in it. It's actually not a large spot size. It's only a few millimeters. Not even that. I think it's like less than 1 millimeter across. Once ChemCam vaporizes that rock, it turns into plasma, this very high energy. And as it's cooling down, it will release a light. That light can be picked up by our spectrometers, and we can tell what wavelengths are inside of that light. And that is how we tell the chemical composition of a rock.
Well, it's like the same thing where when, astronomers are looking at distant stars or exoplanets, they're able to use that spectrum or the spectra to see what's in those atmospheres. So it's a similar process, which is just interesting that all of these basic principles that, you learn in school, you're still able to apply those, whether you're on Mars or going, to an exoplanet, which is really cool. What's something that's one of your favorite parts of the mission that, might be overlooked by everybody else, or that's just, your personal favorite?
So really early on in the mission, before I was even on the team, they found opal, and I was really interested in that just because I can actually find opal here in western Kansas. So that was really interesting to me.
That really is cool.
I think that part got overlooked because there was an even more interesting mineral that was found near it. I forget what that name of the mineral was, but it was really high silica, and that was just groundbreaking for them to find that. So I think the opal part mostly got overlooked, but that was the part that I think attached to, just because I remember learning about these opals in western Kansas, and I was determined to find them. And it took a few hours because we didn't actually know where we were going. And we just stumbled upon like this old dirt road that was just a dead end, and there was just opals everywhere on it.
Oh, that is cool. See, for me, I actually have a background in jewelry. I was a professional jeweler for 15 years almost, or I still am a professional jeweler. I do it on the side. So no, I had no clue that Curiosity actually found opal on Mars. So that is really cool.
Yeah, I don't think it's like the opal you'll put in jewelry, but it's the other type.
Exactly. Yeah, no, just it's interesting that it's on the surface of another planet. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, you're still, how many years do you have left then for school before you finish up with your doctorate?
Well, PhDs are slightly different than your bachelor's. It's harder to estimate.
Sure.
But anywhere between 3 and 5 years.
Where do you hope to go after graduating?
So I know this is a little atypical. Most people say they want to go into academia, but I actually really want to end up at a national lab. So either Jet Propulsion Lab or go back to Los Alamos National Lab. Those would be the top 2 I'm shooting for, but I think I'd be happy at pretty much any national lab.
Well, and why a national lab versus like academia? Like what's the difference? What makes it more appealing to you?
Honestly, I don't really find enjoyment in teaching, which I know sounds very odd because I do like doing outreach, which is
Sure.
its own form of teaching. But I guess I don't want teaching to be like my main thing where you have to prepare 3 lectures a week for a full semester and then all the grading and all the like issues that come with having students. And I think I kind of like being pretty closed off and like I do my research and I go home because academia is definitely not it's much more than just 40 hours a week.
Yeah. Well, there's more demands just on teachers, like you were saying. It takes time away from people, wanting to do research, which is one of the benefits of all of the national laboratories that we have.
Yeah, and that's what I mostly want to do is just do research.
Well, for the national labs too, there's so many innovations and different things that we've discovered, that have come out of Los Alamos, that have come out of these different facilities. Even the International Space Station is a national laboratory. So I think it's something that's really important for people to want to work on.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, you mentioned that you do outreach and, checking out your Solar System Ambassadors page. You've done a lot of different events from speaking at the Cosmosphere to high schools, talking about the Curiosity mission. Can you talk a little bit about the outreach that you do, whether it's with schools, institutions, or through like social media?
It started pretty small to begin with. I was asked to speak at the Galaxy Forum at the Cosmosphere in 2017 because they learned that I just finished an internship with Los Alamos National Laboratory. And that's how it started. And then they asked me, would I do another one for them at, I think it was the Topeka Space Day, and it was aimed at Girl Scouts between the grades of 4th and 8th. And that's when I did it the second time. And for that one, because I knew I had a younger audience, I tried to do something extremely special. But at the same time, I'm a college student. I don't have a ton of money to spend on this. And I came up with this design. It's a string rover. And when you pull all of the strings apart from the corners, it forms a 3D version of the string rover, or of Curiosity. It's the correct dimensions. And then I got a cardboard box that was roughly the same size as Kim Cam, covered it in silver duct tape. And then I got two yardsticks plus an extra ruler, and I got those to be the correct height. So when you put the box on top, it stood as high as Curiosity did. And that's pretty much what started the outreach.
Well, that's, those are great things to be able to engage with people, is having a prop to help them, visualize the dimensions of a spacecraft, or, involving little kids with cool projects like that. So that's really cool. And then what did that lead to once you started doing more outreach work?
Well, that specifically led to me deciding that I wanted to do outreach in Northwest Kansas my last semester of K-State. And that last semester was very special because I worked it out where all of my classes were online. So I could do them from anywhere.
Nice.
And I decided that I was going to speak to as many students in Northwest Kansas as possible. And the reason I chose that was literally because of money. My parents live in town, so I didn't have to pay for a hotel or anything like that.
That's a good constraint to have.
Yeah, I went to my old middle school, my old high school. Some of those teachers were still there. Some of the old principals were there, and they were happy to have me back and speaking to them. And they said just being local was really important for those students to connect with.
Well, they're able to see somebody that's actually doing work in a field. I think it makes science, the STEM fields a little bit more. It brings that home. It's not just these abstract ideas in textbooks. You're actually able to relate what you learned in school to these kids, and I think it's a great example for everybody. From basically kindergarten on up.
At the end, I was only able to speak, I think, to 5th grade and up to seniors in high school, but I counted, plus there was a few other events, but I spoke to about 10% of my hometown, over the course of about 1.5 months.
That's a lot of
And that was
That's a lot of work.
that was the first real time I did that many events back to back. The second time was actually March of this year. I was coming back from Arizona. I had a science conference and it was also spring break. So I decided to line up about 12 talks for outreach and then 2 science conferences in a whole 2-week span. I hit high schools. I spoke to college classes. I spoke to the Cosmosphere. I was just all over the state.
That's a lot of fun, though. I think that's probably a cool way to spend spring break. Most people probably don't do anything anywhere near that academically rigorous. So I'm glad you were able to do that.
Yeah, and the cool thing was, since I knew I was coming back, I decided I wanted to do something more than just my string rover. And I thought about it for about 2 weeks, came up with the dimensions for a PVC pipe rover. And this ended up being very well timed. I had my aunt buy the supplies from a larger town. She brought them to my parents' house where we had someone cut them to the correct dimensions. And then I show up and finish off with the silver material that we bought to cover it. And then it got done about, I think, a few hours before its debut.
That's awesome. So you were able to literally make a life-size Curiosity that you could disassemble, toss in the trunk of your car, drive around, and then reassemble it wherever you were speaking at.
Yep.
That sounds like a great spring break, to be honest. I'm sitting here and I've got in the corner of my office, I've still got the Lego Lunar Lander, and it's still in its box because I haven't had time to build it. So I love projects like that where you're able to physically build a representation of something, just because it's easier for audiences to visualize what's on the surface of another planet.
Plus, it can then sit up there or stand up next to me during the whole presentation. And then another thing that was new from the string rover is inside of the PVC pipes cam, which again is just made out of cardboard. We cut a hole in the front part of it, and now if you pull the eye, I use quotes around that, but if you pull the eye of it, a 23-foot red ribbon comes out. So I can now demonstrate the length of how far cam can actually shoot.
So it can shoot up to 23 feet then?
7 meters.
7 meters. Okay, yeah. I thought it was a little bit just more up close for that instrument. So that's cool to know that it's actually longer range.
Yeah, it's a lot farther than people expect. So that's why we decided to go with this new idea of having the ribbon stored inside the box until I'm ready to pull it out.
Well, I mean, there's just so many things that, you don't think about for that rover. Like, I just always assumed that the laser was a couple inches away from whatever it was zapping. So the fact that you could go 7 meters, that 20 to 23 feet is just, I think that's really cool.
Normally we shoot about, I think our range is we have to shoot more than 7 feet away from the rover. But yeah, if that's the case, then our range is roughly 7 to 23 feet.
As you're finishing up your doctoral degree, what's something that, you hope to be able to communicate to the public and to students?
I guess it kind of depends on the age of the student and where they're located at. For rural Kansas, I specifically want them to know that there are more jobs out there than what you see in your daily life, and that you are just as capable as any other kid out there, even if they grew up next to a science museum. Specifically for girls, I want them to know that there are women out there right now doing exactly what I do, and sometimes even more impressive than what I do, and that they shouldn't be discouraged just because it's normally a male-dominated field.
Definitely. Well, and that's something that, is great about social media is so many people are able to share the stories of what they're working on now. It's really opened up the public's eyes to what the reality of the STEM fields are nowadays. It's not just stuffy lab coats in college, university, or national labs. It's students that are out there making a difference, and it doesn't matter whether you're a woman or you're a man. You're able to make these kind of contributions that push the boundaries of human knowledge.
Yeah, and just as a general thing, I always like to include slides at the very beginning that show this is me in high school that I graduated, this is in college, and then normally I'll include some like silly photos of me and be like, yes, I am a scientist, but I also have other hobbies, or I can be goofy and silly too. I'm specifically trying to stress the point of being a scientist doesn't make you boring. Anyone can be a scientist with whatever hobbies you have.
Well, it's important to have those different aspects of your life. It makes you a little bit more well-rounded, and I think it helps inform the work that you do in other areas of your life. So I think it's important to have those passions and those hobbies. So, Sarah, the summer is still very young, although here in Colorado, it's very young, and we somehow managed to get a solstice snow. Tell the listeners where they can find you online, and also where they can find or come see a program that you're giving over this summer.
So you can follow me on Twitter. I am Sarah Lamm at AstroLamm. Lamm is spelled Lamm. Or if you're looking for specific events, then you can follow me on Facebook. It is Sarah Lamm Solar System Ambassador.
Cool. And I'll be sure to put links to both of those in the show notes. That way people can also click it if they're so inclined. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And, I hope to be able to see you out at the Cosmosphere sometime.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Cosmosphere podcast. Make sure you share and subscribe to the show. We'd love if you would leave a review on iTunes. They're crucial to the success of podcasts. So we'd appreciate it if you could take just a minute to leave a rating or review in Apple Podcasts. For the Cosmosphere, I'm John Molnix.